I'm here today with Catherine Stothart, who is a leadership coach who's coached and trained hundreds of leaders to engage and motivate their teams and to develop themselves in top multinational companies, including Airbus, Google, and Audi. And she's also the author of 2 books, How to Get On With Anyone, a practical guide to understanding others and communicating with confidence and charisma, and Motivation, the ultimate guide to leading your team. She has lived in Egypt and Brazil, but now, brilliantly, she's just up the road from me in Chester. So welcome to the show, Catherine. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you, Alison. It's lovely to be here. And it's
great.
nice that we're quite close, although we're in different studios, as it were, at the moment. We are physically, as you said, not far
Just up the
apart.
road. If I opened the window, I could bawl in a loud love and you'd hear me, which would be really lovely. So I'm going to start off with asking you about motivation. Here's the book. Look, if you're looking at it, there it is. I'm going to ask you about motivation. And you've got these sort of 4 key fundamental human needs that you set out, which seem to me very insightful. Just talk us through what motivates us. How do we get the science of that if you're a manager?
Okay, right. That's quite a big question, of course.
I know.
But basically, it appears from research and evidence and so on that there are 4 core needs we all share as human beings. So we need to feel that we belong, to a team, a group, a family, or whatever. We need to feel that we're competent and that we're respected for our skills. We need to feel that we have some freedom, some choice and control over what we do and when we do it. And we have a need to fulfill our potential, be the best we can be, sort of thing. Now, these 4 core needs, it's believed that they're universal. We all share them, but sometimes one of them can be more important for a particular individual than the others. But basically, we share them all. I haven't sort of randomly invented these core needs myself. They're based on research. So partly Maslow. So most managers I work with are familiar with Maslow.
Yeah, so the hierarchy of needs, certainly.
That's right, yeah. And you'll say, who's heard of Maslow? And they put their hands up. And you'll say, and what's at the top of his hierarchy of needs? And they'll look blank. Self-actualization, that's dead right, yeah. And then you'll say, what's self-actualization? Nobody knows.
It's the thing that's at the top of Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, and I mean, for me, it's about fulfilling your potential. But anyway, basically, the point I'm trying to make is that most managers, they're busy people, they've heard of Maslow, and that's it. But actually, there's a whole other body of well-researched and well-evidenced stuff by some people called Ryan and Deci and their self-determination theory. And they believe that we have 3 other, apart from fulfilling our potential, we have these needs for belonging, for competence, and for freedom. They actually use slightly different words than me. They call it relatedness for belonging. They say competence, and they call freedom autonomy. So they use slightly different words. And I know that you will have heard of Dan Pink and his book Drive. His book Drive is based on the work of Ryan and Deci as well. And what I've done, I've sort of used some of Ryan and Deci and some of Maslow to say, right, these are 4 core needs that motivate us. And why is it important to know that? Well, for a manager, it's important to know it because you're really responsible for creating the conditions under which people can feel motivated. So if we have these core needs, how as a manager can you engage them to give them a sense of purpose? How can you connect with them to give them that sense of belonging and meet their needs for belonging? How can you help them meet their needs for competence by how you develop them or give them feedback? And how can you meet their needs for freedom by delegating or whatever? So for managers, I think it's really important to know about these core needs and then therefore how you might need to manage people. But I also think for you as an individual, it's important to know, if you know that, I've got a need for such and such, say belonging, but actually I'm neglecting that at the moment, or I'm not able to meet that need. You're not going to be as happy. You're not going to have well-being. And if you're aware of that, you can think, okay, what shall I do about that? How can I feel that I belong to my group, my team, my organization, my family, or whatever it might be? So that's a bit of a brief overview. If hopefully that sort of paints the picture a little bit.
No, it's and really beautifully articulated. And of course, as you point out in the book as well, that sense that the dislocation, if your primary need is competence, but you're managing somebody whose primary need is belonging, if you're not aware of that, then you're setting yourself up to fail, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. Because if your primary need, say, is competence, then you're probably somebody who's a lifelong learner. You probably like to be independent. You probably like to innovate. find better ways of doing things, be more strategic. So these core needs lead to certain patterns of behavior. So, you might be a manager who has that core need and has those patterns of behavior. But if you're managing somebody who has a high need for belonging and wants regular feedback and wants regular check ins with you and wants to know how they're progressing regularly and maybe wants some more guidance than you would typically need yourself, then you're not able to, meet the needs of them, and then they don't perform as well. They
Yeah.
become less confident, and they don't stretch themselves, and they're not so happy in their work.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's a really lovely example of how theory plays so crucially into practice in the workplace. And I want to come on to that actually, because it's something that you do exceptionally well. But I also, before I leave this sort of just discussion of what you write about, I thought it was really fascinating as well, the way that motivation stuff plays into the communication stuff. So your first book about how to get on with anyone and those sort of interaction styles. And I know in the prep, I asked you this question. Oh, that's a really interesting question. So,
yeah.
so let's just take a couple of minutes. How does that sense of what motivates you interact with your preference for communication, if you like?
Yes, that is quite a complicated question. But I mean, for me, at a fairly simple level, you have to start with communication. So if you're a manager, you need to know how to communicate with the individuals in your team in a way that builds rapport with them, so that they trust you. Because unless you have rapport with them and they trust you, they're not going to be open to having discussions with you about their performance. They're not going to be that open to coaching, say, or having feedback or whatever. And also, you're not going to be able to find out what it is that really motivates them, what's important to them, what do they really enjoy, what do they really do well, unless you can get onto the same wavelength as them. So my first book, How to Get On With Anyone, was based on a sort of framework of behavior called interaction styles. And that basically helps people understand the impact of how they come across, the impact of their behavior on other people, and how to adapt that if it's not having the impact that they want.
Mm.
So, when we communicate, we usually have a positive intention. We don't set out to be awkward or difficult. Well, I don't think we do.
Most people don't. We all know some.
Yeah. So usually we have a positive intention, but sometimes the way we come across can have a negative impact, and then we don't have the influence we want. So if you're more aware of, oh, well, actually, yeah, I've got this great intention, I've got this positive intention, I want to get something done, for example, but actually the way I'm coming across is I'm being impatient or demanding, and then people aren't responding in the way I want, and they're withdrawing from me. If you're more aware of your impact, you can adapt that. And similarly, if you're more aware of what other people need from you or what's driving their behavior, you can again flex and adapt to sort of meet them in the middle, as it were. So I'm not sure if I fully answered your question, but basically I think, you have to start with communication. And I think the motivation side, you're going a bit deeper because you're going into not just what we're doing and how we're doing it, but you're going into why we're doing it when you're going into motivation.
But the relationship piece is the foundational piece, because without that, you've got nothing as a manager.
That's right.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think we've already demonstrated that you have a particular knack for translating theory, quite chewy academic theory, into stuff you can use every day in the office. So, and I, that runs like a golden thread through both of your books that I've read. So just tell me a little bit about that. Is it something you consciously set out to do? How do you do it?
I don't know. I mean, it is conscious in the sense that I see myself, managers are busy people. And in fact, my first book wasn't just for managers. The second book, Motivation Book, was primarily for people working with other people or who manage other people. My first book was sort of more general, really, for anybody. But slightly lost my thread there, what I was going to say. Managers are busy people. That's what I was going to say. And they haven't got the time to read all this research, and they're not interested in it. They have their own field of professional and technical competence. I'm interested in this stuff. I'm interested in behavior and psychology and so on. And so I sort of see my role as integrating, synthesizing, gathering stuff, thinking about it and getting the nuggets out of it. And then just giving the managers the nuggets without all the fluff, the background that they don't really want to know. So I'm the sort of translator of the more complicated stuff into some simple nuggets that they can use, but hopefully they're also nuggets that are based on, sound theory, sound research, solid evidence, experience. I mean, a lot of what's in both my books, actually, there's case studies in both of them, and a lot of the case studies are based on my own experience of people that I've coached or teams I've worked with, where I've really
And
seen the theory play out in practice. It comes to
yes.
life. And so then that's what I try
Yeah.
to do in the books, bring it to life.
And also give it words that you can use in the office without sounding as though you're talking like a textbook. You've already said you've renamed that stuff in a way that just makes it feel more like part of a normal conversation than academic speak.
Yes. Yeah. I don't really like jargon at all.
Yeah.
Organizations are full of jargon. And it's amazing. I'm somebody who, if I'm in a meeting and somebody uses an acronym I don't understand, I will say, "Oh, what does that mean?" But I've sat in meetings and I know people don't understand what's being spoken about, and they're too afraid of appearing ignorant. And because they're not ignorant,
Mm.
we just don't have the same, knowledge or experience to draw on. So yeah, I like to explain things in, I won't say simple because they're not simplistic, but simple, clear
Mm.
language. I remember a very
Yeah.
simple, quick example. Years ago, I worked for ICL, computer company. And one of the issues with computers is radio frequency interference, RFI. So I was very familiar with this term RFI, meaning radio frequency interference. And then I went and worked in another organization and they kept saying RFI. And I was sort of scratching my head thinking, I don't understand this. This is not making sense. And what they meant was request for information. So,
Ah.
I mean, it's just, so I try to avoid acronyms, jargon. I want people to be able to read my stuff and understand it, not read
Mm.
my stuff and think, what on earth is she talking about?
And I think this is, for me, the essence of a really useful business book, is that it's drawing on really solid, well-established, well-proven theory, well thought through, and it's absolutely practical. And it's something that you can take into the office and use tomorrow, and it helps you do your job better. It makes your life better.
Yeah.
So I think that's when I say you do it, and I'm going to push it again because I just think it's so interesting for people, because people know they need to do it, but they find it really hard. And I know you find it hard to articulate how you do it.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, in a sense, you've given us a bit of the answer to the puzzle there. It's just that relentless focus on making this something that people can understand without having read the manual.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
without having been embedded in the field for the last 10 years. So
Yes.
do you, when you write something, do you test it out on yourself? Has it become instinctive now? Do you test it out on other people?
Well, I certainly test stuff out on other people, as in, with both my books, I got other people to read them and so on. Do I test? Yeah, I think I do. I think I do. And I tell you the other thing that has probably helped me. I do quite a lot of workshops and always have done. I've worked as a team facilitator for many years. And and I've also done training. So I've facilitated teams, but I've also delivered training on things like, I don't know, interview skills or appraisal skills or whatever it might be. And when you're delivering face-to-face training, you have to explain things so the people in that room can
Yes.
understand you immediately. And then they go and, you break them into groups and they do some practical exercises. And, you need them to be able to know what they're doing, understand what they're doing, why they're doing it and how to do it. So I think probably when I write, I'm almost, not deliberately, but I think in the back of my head, I'm sort of writing it as if I'm saying it to a group, as if I'm
Yes.
running a workshop and I'm talking to a
And you can
group.
imagine the blank looks that you would get if you said something without translating it
Yes,
first.
yes, yes. So yeah. So I've only just sort of realised this since you've pushed me and asked me the question. Yeah, I think I'm writing it as I would say it if I was explaining it to a group of people that needed to understand it so they could go and do something with it. Mm.
Yeah, brilliant
Mm.
tip. Thank you so much. When you
Mm.
write, I know you've got that, we've got a lovely mental image of you sort of mentally in front of the room of people. I love that. What's your process? Because you obviously, you're a fluent writer
Mm.
now. You've done several books. You're doing a new edition of your first book. What's your soup to nuts kind of process for how you do it, your systems and so on.
Yeah, I'm not very hot on systems. So I listened to one of your recent podcasts, I think it was Rachel Law's, and I thought, wow, I don't do it anything like she does. So that's
There's
just,
a woman with a
yeah,
system.
exactly. So I think that goes to prove that as a writer, or an author, you have to find what works for you. But basically, how do I work? So, I mean, with my first book, How to Get On With Anyone, that I was thinking about the topic and running workshops and coaching people using this framework of interaction styles, probably for about 4 or 5 years before I even thought about writing a book. So I sort of immersed myself in that and gathered content and gathered case studies. And then I thought, oh, I should really write a book about this. So, and then my second book, the motivation book. I say second book, it's actually my third technically, because I do have an ebook, but that's only available to people that subscribe to an organisation called Bookboon. So anyway, my second proper book, motivation. Again, it was a topic I'd been interested in for a very long time. I did my master's degree 20 years ago, and motivation as a topic was a big element of that degree. So again, I'd been gathering information and examples and case studies for quite a long time. But basically, what do I do? So I think I start with the content and then try to make sense of it. So, and I'm conscious at the moment, as you said, I'm writing a second edition. I'm about to start writing a second edition of How to Get On With Anyone. And it'll have some new chapters and some new content. There'll be stuff on leadership, and there'll be a whole chapter on EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion. So for those, I'm already gathering content, but I'm not very structured in the way. I don't use any formal systems or processes. So for example, I might cut out an article from a newspaper. So that'll get filed in a folder, divided into sections. I am slightly organised. Stuff that's electronic, I'm just gathering into folders at the moment. There's a folder for leadership, there's a folder for EDI. If I see interesting articles or interesting links, I'll put them into that folder. So they're there. And then I think my next stage is I gather loads of stuff, but then I need a model or a framework or whatever you call it. So with my and I don't know what that's going to be for the EDI, for example. I don't know what my framework is going to be. I sort of start with gathering the content and then think, well, what's going to work to make sense of this for other people? So with my first book, How to Get On With Anyone, I gathered lots of material, and then I thought, oh, this is really about emotional intelligence. So I could hang this around, self-awareness, being aware of your impact on others and being able to manage the emotions that affect your behavior, and awareness of other people and being able to manage the relationships with them. So I had that sort of emotional intelligence model, plus the sort of intention and impact that I've already mentioned. And then I could hang my material around that. And with the motivation book, I came across a definition of motivation. It was something like, motivation is what drives your choice of what to do, and also how hard you try and how long you keep trying for. And I thought, oh, that's persistence and resilience. So the sort of model for the motivation book is I've hung it all around this sense of having a sense of purpose, persistence and resilience. As well as the different patterns of behavior we were talking about earlier, the core needs. So I think I gather content and then I say, right, what frameworks or model does this naturally fall into? And then I can make sense of all this content that I've got. So it's very much a sort of synthesizes stuff, but then almost breaking it up again and analysing it into whatever segments make sense.
Yeah, and it's a sort of in-out thing, isn't it? It's really interesting that you create your buckets. So to break down the buckets in the way that you do, what you're going to collect, you've got a structure in your head, and then it's almost a sort of ground up rebuilding of that structure, depending on what you find and how you see it fitting together. It's really interesting.
Yes, and this is not something I've learned. This is just the way I work. But as I said, other authors will undoubtedly, I'm sure you've met many authors, they'll work differently.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there are similar stages that we approach differently, but that's iterative nature, that sort of sense of I've got a hypothesis, if you like, and I gather my information and then I process it and I rework, and out of that comes something new. I think that is common to pretty much every author that I've spoken to. So it's really interesting. What do you find most enjoyable about the process?
Enjoyable about that process that I've just described, really.
Well, about
Yeah.
the whole of the
Well,
writing the
okay.
book, and you can go into
Yeah.
marketing if you like as well. Why not?
Oh
Hey.
gosh. Just narrowing it onto that process I just described. I think what I find most enjoyable is feeling I've created something new, or a new way of
Mm,
looking at something, and then people being able to use it. Actually, that
yeah,
I've added something here. Um,
yeah.
the whole process of writing a book. Oh my god! I mean, one of the things I find rewarding, I suppose, is when people say to you, "Oh, that book, it was so helpful." Or I was speaking to a client last week, and she said, and I've got a set of cards that she had bought and used, and she said, "I still have them. I still use them. I still refer to them. This is a year later." So I mean, I love that. The actual writing, I do enjoy writing. I have to say, and I think why I enjoy it is because I'm a bit of a thinker, and it helps me clarify my thoughts. So I do actually,
Mm,
when I know I've got to write, a book, or in this case, the second edition that's coming up, I will set aside certain time for it, but I will look forward to doing it. And I feel frustrated when I can't. So if everyday life takes
mm,
me away from it when I want to write, I feel frustrated because I know I've got stuff I want to write. That doesn't mean that it always works, though, of course, because sometimes you can sit down, you can start off, yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this today. You start off, and then suddenly, oh my God, it won't come, or I can't, this idea I've got in my head, I can't get it out. So, but yeah, I do enjoy writing. I enjoy writing. I write articles, I write a blog, I have a newsletter,
mm.
and I do all of that because I enjoy writing.
Yeah, and you put it beautifully, that sense that it's helping you clarify your thinking, but it's also that it's the time where you focus on the stuff that
Yes,
really
that's right.
interests you, isn't it? And when other people take you away from
That's
that,
right.
it's
That's
really
right.
maddening.
Which again
Yeah,
comes back to
how funny.
motivation. If you know what
Yes.
motivates you and what energizes you, then the whole point of my motivation book was that you need to find ways to do more of what energizes you and manage the things that drain your energy. Try and minimize them as much as possible. But a lot of people, I think, at work don't know actually really what
Mm,
motivates them, what their core needs are, and how they might meet those needs in their work life, but also outside work as well.
yeah, and I think
If you,
sadly a lot of people think that they're not gonna meet those needs at work at all and
I
sort of
know,
disengage and
yeah,
find them outside the office, yeah, which is a
yeah,
shame because
it
actually
is.
work can be such a satisfying part of your life.
Yeah, and it's such a big part in terms of time.
Yes.
So yeah, it's you
Yeah.
can
So in terms of the time you're awake, it's a huge, it really breaks into your day, doesn't
it does.
it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you for your best tip, Catherine. So if somebody's just starting out on this journey, well, I guess I'm asking, what do you wish you'd known before you started writing business books?
I think what I wish I'd known before I started writing the first one was how important it is to talk to other people. So as you've probably gathered, I've said I like writing, I like thinking. So I'm quite self-contained in many ways, although I also like talking as we're doing now. So for my first book, I think I could have talked to more people,
Mm,
just all sorts of people, just randomly, because when you say you're writing a book to somebody, they'll immediately want to talk to you about it and ask you about it. And so I found with my second book, Motivation, that I was more upfront because like the first one, you're not quite, oh, am I really an author? I'm a little bit diffident about it, not quite confident about it, perhaps to some extent. But with the second book, I'm a published author already. So I didn't mind saying to people, oh yeah, I'm writing a book. What happens when they say to you, what's it about? You have to be able to explain it in a way they can understand, that they find interesting and engaging. So just that, at a basic level, is really, really important. I remember one guy saying to me, well, isn't everybody just motivated by achieving things? Surely, and at the time, I didn't have a very good answer to that. So telling people about your book, whoever they might be, challenges you. It enables you to
yes.
get your thinking even clearer, and know what it is you really want to say. So talk to
Yeah.
people, and I've learned that People will be happy to be interviewed for your book, and then they might be willing to endorse it. They're quite often happy to be quoted as in case studies, because they like it. They like feeling that they're going to be in a book. Most of my case studies, by the way, are anonymous, but some people in my second book said they were happy to be named with their actual names, sort of thing. So, which is nice. So yeah, talk to people, tell them and you learn so much. You learn from other people all the time,
Yeah. It's such a great tip. And as you say, so many benefits from it. But even just that really basic one of having to describe your book, the first time you do it, it's a hot mess, isn't it?
Yes.
And then you sort of get better and better at it.
Yeah.
And even that in itself would be good enough reason to do it. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm also going to ask you for a book recommendation, Catherine. So what book would you say that people who are listening should have a read of?
Right. Well, I was going to say Matthew Syed's Rebel Ideas, but then I heard your podcast with Catherine Garrett, and she recommended that one. So I thought, I can't.
Not for the first time, actually. I think that's come up a few times, that one.
Right. Yeah. No, it's just, it's about diversity of
it's
approach.
A great book.
It is. So then I thought, well, actually, a book I quote a lot is Timothy Galway's The Inner Game of Work. People often know about, he wrote The Inner Game of Tennis, The Inner Game of Golf. Yeah, people often know about those, but he actually wrote one about 20 years ago called The Inner Game of Work. So it's more work focused, but it does have tennis examples in, and I play tennis, so I like his tennis examples. But his basic point is performance equals your potential minus interference, the interference coming often from your own thoughts and feelings. So in a sense, both of my books are about how to manage your own thoughts and feelings better to reduce the interference that you the way in which you interfere with yourself and improve your performance. But anyway, I think that's performance equals potential minus interference. That's his core idea. And I think that's really important. Yeah, it is. And it comes,
because there's interference that you have no control over, but there's an awful lot you do.
Yeah. And as a coach, I work as a leadership coach, a lot of, when people realize they can reduce some of their own interference, it just lifts the weight from them. It really does.
And again, it feeds into that sense of autonomy, which is very energizing. And absolutely. Brilliant. Great recommendation. Thank you. And I haven't had that one before.
Oh, good.
Go and check it out.
Good.
Catherine, if people want to find out more about you, more about how to get on with anyone and motivation, more about the work that you do, where should they go?
Well, I have a website called Essenwood. That's the name of my business, actually. So it's www.essenwood, E-S for sugar, E-N, wood.co.uk. And there's pages there about my 2 books. There's also a resource hub, which has lots of explainer videos, very short videos that explain different things, and articles and templates that are downloadable. And there's a free workbook that goes with the motivation book that's downloadable. So, and they can sign up for my newsletter there as well. So I would say go to my website. Both the books are on Amazon. If you're thinking of buying the motivation book, it's cheaper on Routledge than on Amazon.
Good to know.
Yeah. But yeah, and I would love people to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the other. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so I always accept connection requests on LinkedIn. So that would be great as well.
Brilliant. Well, I'll put those links up on the show notes at extraordinarybusinessbooks.com, along with the transcript of this conversation. And it's such a pleasure to talk to you, Catherine. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for inviting me, Alison. It's been great.